Ancient ruins from a lost civilization decorate cliffs and caverns throughout the lands between. These ruins are ancient and mysterious. The civilization who built them long since fallen. Their history and knowledge forgotten. Or has it? There is a path forward to reclaim what was once lost. A puzzle we can piece together using clues in the architecture and relics they left behind. We'll uncover how this ancient civilization originated the understanding of the wisdom beyond stone, and how they used this technology to create an army of golems and forge a powerful alliance. We'll discover how they sought to not only control the flow of water in the lands between, but the flow of the spiritual energy cycle itself. Only in the realm of shadow has the name of this lost civilization been remembered. They are the Rauh civilization, and theirs is the origin of the alliance of night and flame. What made the Rauh civilization so powerful? Spirit manipulating technology. We find Rauh burrows within the ancient ruins of Rauh. As the game describes, in the center of the stone is a small nest-like hole. Once this is inhabited by a sprite, the stone can be used as a ritual implement. This ritual implement appears to be a sprite stone, which you can craft with a Rauh burrow and a spirit calculus. The Rauh burrow appears to be nothing more than an oval stone with an engraving, whereas spirit calculus is suffused with spirituality. The spirit calculus brings magic in the form of spiritual energy into the equation. Combining them together, a sprite stone is stone inhabited by a spirit. A burrow is a small hole that an animal digs to use as a dwelling. In a sprite stone, a spirit is what dwells within that hole. This is the key discovery of the Rauh civilization, the knowledge of how to join spirit and stone, to infuse spirit into matter, a technology that came to be known as the wisdom of stone. What did the Rauh civilization do with their technology, with the knowledge of infusing spirit into stone? They created golems. No, not that golem. These large golems, found guarding important locations around the lands between. The game refers to these creatures as golems, which is fitting because the word golem is a Hebrew word meaning animated stone creature. The item descriptions for the golem weapons say they are made of black stone and were crafted by a civilization now gone to ruin. The Rauh ruins are ruins, and they are made of a black stone. There's a second type of sprite stone, a fire sprite stone, that we can craft from a Rauh burrow, a spirit calculus, and Mesmer's ember. The fire sprite stone may have been the prototype for the engine powering these golems. Rauh was adept at working with fire. We find these golems in proximity to many of the ancient ruins. There's one on the Divine Staircase in the ancient ruins of Rauh shooting great arrows at you. There's the one in High Road Cave holding the blue dancer charm. There are many golems in and around the Snow Valley ruins. And here's one standing on top of the ruins lining the beach in Caelid. These were not the only golems the Rauh civilization were responsible for. There are many symbols and carvings covering the Rauh ruins, but one more than anything else. This symbol here, which I refer to as the between two trees symbol. But we don't find this symbol on the large stone structures, and the only place in the lands between we do find it is at the ruin-strewn precipice. The interesting thing is that we do find the same symbol in a more modern location, at the base of the imp and watchdog statues in the catacombs. The game also refers to these creatures as golems, and I think the presence of this symbol links their creation to Rauh. The crystal dart item description tells us that, long ago, it is said that a golem crafter employed a similar crystal tool. These crystal darts work on the imps, watchdogs, and black stone golems by driving them into a frenzy to attack each other instead of attacking you. A pretty nifty tool to control your creations. This suggests that these creatures were all crafted using the same technology if not by the same creator entirely. Then there are the golem smiths that we find in the ruined forges. Crystal darts work on them, too, suggesting that they were also built with the same technology. Yet they appear the most primitive of all golems that we see, essentially just rocks cobbled together into a humanoid shape, meaning perhaps they were the first ones created, and created to work in these forges. However, there are a few architectural motifs shared between Rauh architecture and the architecture of the ruined forges. Only these fire braziers from what I can find. So I don't think that Rauh built these forges. Instead, it's more likely that Rauh technology was shared with the culture who did build them, perhaps as part of an alliance. There's evidence for a Rauh-Fire Alliance in the architecture of the largest forge in the game, the Forge of Ruin. The forge itself is covered with architectural motifs that are also found on the Divine Towers. The lower platform and supporting pillars beneath the forge are covered with these same motifs. This video is not about the Divine Towers directly, but I wrote an essay about how it was likely the Fire Giant Serpent Alliance built the forge and the Divine Towers, which is linked below in the description if you want to check it out. Sandwiched between these two sets of Divine Tower motif-encrusted structures are the same blackstone ruins unique to Rauh. What this most likely means is that both cultures came together to build this structure, the Forge of Ruin and the platform that it stands on. We can see evidence of the Rauh-Fire Alliance in the Rauh ruins themselves. There is a huge altar of fire in the ruins in the Shadow Realm, and the ruined forge braziers line their halls. Rauh needed a workforce to build these large ruins for them. These structures are huge, and their ceilings tall enough to house fire giants. The Rauh civilization figured out how to infuse spirit into stone. The smithing culture, precursor to the fire giants, figured out how to shape stone. Rauh used their spirit-manipulating technology to bring to life the stone creations made by the smithing culture. This was the origin of the wisdom beyond stone, and it seems to have arisen because Rauh knew how to put these little sprites into these little holes and manipulate them. The discovery of this technology and its subsequent evolution led to a powerful alliance between Rauh and the smithing fire giant culture, the Rauh-Fire Alliance. We'll come back to this a little later, because now we must talk not about fire, but about water. I believe that Rauh's original purpose was to be the stewards of flowing water. Most places where we find the Rauh ruins, we find water. The ancient ruins of Rauh themselves are flooded, with many waterfalls careening off into the ravine below. There's an aqueduct carrying water in the middle of the ruins. In the lands between, the Blackstone ruins are often found near locations with water. A waterfall careens out of the side of a cliff beneath the relevantly named Seaside Ruins in Limgrave. The Snow Valley ruins are built alongside this now frozen river. Torrents of water flow into Liurnia of the Lakes through the Rauh ruins at ruin-strewn precipice, the very source of Liurnia's flooding. At the top of the ruin-strewn precipice is Maker Worm's boss room, which is filled with stone aqueducts transporting water. We find these same stone aqueducts in High Road Cave, a location filled with flowing water, deep pools, and waterfalls. High Road Cave is where we get the Blue Dancer Charm, the item which tells us the legend of the blind swordsman, Melania's teacher who taught her the waterfall dance and how flowing water can protect against the scarlet rot. Other item descriptions involving the blind swordsman tell us that this blue color symbolizes, quote, brisk waters, as fluid and flowing as the sword in the hand of its wearer. Just as still waters turn foul, stagnation leads to decay. Warriors must remain ever drifting. The real sword is not a physical one, but the power of water itself, which protects against stagnation and rot. The blue dancer charm, protected by a guardian golem amongst Rauh ruins, is referred to as an ancient heirloom. Perhaps an heirloom from Rauh, who may have used flowing water to fight rot long ago. The Rauh civilization's expertise was in their knowledge of the power of flowing water. If this hypothesis is correct, it may explain why we find their ruins along these cliffs in Limgrave and in Caelid. In Limgrave, the ruins stick up out of the water, holding up most of the coast of the Weeping Peninsula. I think the reason for this is that they were put there to guard against the erosion of the land by the ocean. This is a real issue. As Tarnished archaeologists pointed out, the landmass is called the Weeping Peninsula, but it's actually an island. Peninsulas are bordered on 3 sides by water. Erosion may be why this is no longer the case. Similarly, this could be why we find these ruins along the beach next to the cliffs in Caelid. The presence of the beach here suggests that this was once ocean, and these ruins may have helped support the cliffs and prevent erosion from the waves. Though in modern times this is no longer an issue, as ocean levels have clearly fallen. Rauh did not only value the power of flowing water, they may have also been responsible for manipulating it. Returning to the Rauh-Fire Alliance for a moment, I will admit that it's a little strange to think of the water-focused Rauh being aligned with the flame-focused fire giants, because water and fire usually do not mix. But it makes more sense when you think of their alliance beginning with the smithing culture. Rauh's expertise was in manipulating flowing water. The smith's expertise was in manipulating flowing lava, molten metal. Look at the lava in the bottom of the forges. It flows and churns like water does. These giant pipes are like water pipes, but for molten metal. Like a giant straw, they pull up molten metal to move it through the forge to be worked by the smiths. This technology could have originated with Rauh civilization, inspired by their aqueducts. We can connect Rauh civilization to another culture, the Astrologers. This link between Rauh and the Astrologers is supported architecturally. As far as we know, the Astrologers built and inhabited the rises. The rises are made out of a similar black stone. They are also each close to a source of water or near a coastline, like the Rauh ruins. The inner chambers of the rises have an 8-pointed octagonal gear-like shape. This is the same design and shape as the cross-sections of the pillars of the Rauh civilization. There is an invisible bridge which extends from a broken Rauh bridge leading to Heretical Rise, and there is an invisible bridge in the Rauh ruins leading to this structure. The Astrologers likely established themselves at Stargazer's ruins, which is sandwiched between 2 sets of Rauh ruins. The Astrologers discovered glintstone sorcery. The earliest known glintstone sorceries are referred to as primeval, because they were discovered by astrologers who made contact with the primeval current. The primeval current is a current. A current is that which runs or flows, typically referring to a portion of a large body of water moving in a certain direction. In Berserk, a big inspiration of Miyazaki's, the current of causality is described as a river. This water imagery is supported by how the founding primeval glintstone sorcery is called Founding Rain of Stars, which summons a cloud to create star rain. Azur's primeval sorcery, Comet Azur, fires a tremendous comet in a torrent akin to the distant starry expanse. The word torrent is typically used to describe a strong, fast-moving stream of water. While you may not think of the sky and space as water, ancient peoples did. The Genesis creation story states, quote, "And God made the dome, and divided the waters which were under the dome from the waters which were above the dome. And it was so. And God called this dome sky." What all of this is getting at is that the origins of primeval glintstone sorcery had strong connections to water. It makes sense that the first person to conceptualize the primeval current as a current would have first been familiar with the nature of flowing water, and the best candidate to do this would be a person from a civilization which controlled flowing water. After all, another name for flowing water is a current. This may have something to do with why Crucible Knight Devonia is in the Rauh ruins looking for the origin of the Crucible, because the Crucible is referred to as a current in the Spira incantation. Discussing that possibility is for another exciting day. Furthermore, ancient astrologers who made contact with the primeval current like Azur, Lusat, and Wilhelm studied the wisdom of stone, the secrets locked in the faint cogitation of the Crystalians. The Crystalians are inorganic life forms who yet live, similar in nature to the living stone golems we've already linked to Rauh. Related, the astrologers knew how to imbue their souls into stone by slicing open their hearts with a primal glintstone blade to create primal glintstones. The knowledge that stone can possess spirit and how to bond spirit and stone likely originated with Rauh's expertise with bonding sprites to stone. There are many hints that it was an astrologer who was the original glintstone craftsman who created the golems. While the glintstone craftsman's cookbook has a picture of crystal darts on its page, its item text tells us that it was written by a glintstone craftsman who served the academy. But the glintstone craftsman's cookbooks don't tell us how to craft crystal darts. We actually learn how to craft crystal darts from the Nomadic Merchant Cookbook 11. We buy this from a nomadic merchant in Liurnia of the Lakes, who also sells the Astrologer set. I think this suggests that the nomadic merchant met an astrologer who taught him how to make the crystal darts. The Preceptor set tells us that the sorcerers descended from the astrologers, meaning the Academy glintstone craftsmen likely inherited this technology from the astrologers, who first developed it using their understanding of glintstone. The astrologer craftsman may have been Rabath, whose rise we find in the Shadow Realm near the Cathedral of Manus Meter. He is notable because he is referred to as a spell machinist. In the original Japanese, the kanji translated as spell machinist are. These kanji mean magic or sorcery. This one means expert or teacher, but this one means skill, art, craft. This Rabath could be this hypothetical glintstone craftsman. His name also begins with a Ra, perhaps a nod to the Rauh culture. All of this leads me to believe that Rauh and the people who built the rises, the astrologers, are heavily intertwined. I cannot say for certain that they coexisted, but I do believe that it is more likely that Rauh came before the astrologers, given the more modern architecture of the rises and the more advanced technology of the astrologers compared to Rauh. This would make the astrologers descendants of Rauh. Rauh had an alliance with the Fire Giants. The astrologers are probably descended from Rauh. When you think of the astrologers and the Fire Giants, does anything in particular come to mind? Perhaps the sole item in the game that mentions these two groups together. The Sword of Night and Flame. The Sword of Night and Flame tells us, quote, astrologers who preceded the sorcerers established themselves in the mountaintops that nearly touched the sky and considered the Fire Giants their neighbors. This description reveals two things. First thing, the beginning of the astrologers as a faction started up in the mountaintops. Assuming we are right about their connection to Rauh, this suggests to me that the astrologers began as a branch of Rauh, who migrated to the mountaintops. After all, we do find a plethora of Rauh ruins in the mountaintops. Astrologer means stargazer. The Stargazer's ruins are likely where the astrologers first established themselves, and these ruins are sandwiched between two sets of Rauh ruins. Second thing, the phrasing of the item text and the use of the word neighbors makes it sound like the astrologers and Fire Giants had a pretty friendly relationship. Considering how the sword itself is divided into two halves, the night side and the flame side, I would go so far as to call it an alliance. This alliance is the alliance of night and flame. Earlier, we discussed how the links to the fire sprite stones, golems, and the forge's construction is evidence for a Rauh-Fire Alliance. I think now what we can say is that the Rauh-Fire Alliance is actually the alliance of night and flame. This alliance didn't begin with the Astrologers and Fire Giants. It began with Rauh and the smithing culture, who later became the Astrologers and Fire Giants. It's a popular theory that the Fire Giants were the ones who built all of these ruins. The ruins are gigantic and could house fire giants, and the giants were known for working stone. But the water of it all doesn't fit with them. Instead, I think that the original smithing fire giant faction were sworn in service to the Rauh faction, like the trolls were sworn in service to the Carians in the modern age. The trolls are descendants of the fire giants, and the Carians are descendants of the astrologers. In service to their oath, they built these ruins on the instruction of the original Rauh culture. In fact, perhaps it was this very oath which marked the founding of the Alliance in the first place. Why would it make sense that Rauh could be connected with night when they are so intertwined with water? Well, this goes all the way back to where we started, with spirits and with the afterlife. The afterlife is often described using watery imagery. Saint Trina's version of death is called slumber. Slumber is likened to falling deep, being submerged, and sunken, like dying is sinking deep into some kind of ocean. Saint Trina's symbol is a water lily, a flower which closes up beneath the water at night and reopens above the water during the day. As this NPC ghost tells us, quote, "I was once told a coffin could convey its passenger upon a gentle cruise to the velvet garden of deepest purple." He is referring to the ancient practices of water burials. The ghost's dialogue suggests that these stone coffin ships were sent down the Alec River, through the Cerulean coast, and down the fissure to the deep purple garden where we find Saint Trina. Here, red and blue essences drip down and coagulate into putrescence, a form of rot, where their spiritual life is renewed when they fertilize new buds. We enter a coffin in the nameless eternal city and travel down a waterfall to get to Noxtella. This stone coffin water burial practice was inherited by the Nox. The river in Noxtella ends at the Lake of Rot. The Nox clearly built the dam here, which caused the stagnation of water that created the Lake of Rot. They may have been trying to emulate the function of the deep purple garden, but they only ended up with a scarlet Lake of Rot. In the lowest reaches of Stormvale, there's evidence of water burials. These wooden boats with skeletons are in the room right before Godwyn's corpse, like they were flowing towards him, the Prince of Death, death itself. The afterlife being like water may explain why his body is this weird fish-looking sea creature. A mariner is a sailor, and the Tibia mariners ride boats through spirit waters, oftentimes through actual watery graveyards. Caro's hidden grave is where we find the Tibia mariner in the Shadow Realm. The name Caro likely comes from the Greek deity Charon, the ferryman who guided souls across the river Styx to the afterlife. The dead need leadership, and like we call spirits with our spirit summoning bell, the Tibia mariners appear to use their horns to guide the spirits on their journey in the afterlife. Perhaps the Tibia mariners functioned like lighthouses, leading the dead to rebirth in the fissure, or towards Godwyn's death route. The fissure may even be the hidden grave of Caro. In the modern age, the rebirth of spirits is carried out by returning spirits to the roots of the Erd Tree, most directly via Erd Tree burial in the catacombs. In the pre-Erd Tree times, death was burned in ghost flame. However, Tibia's cookbook says mariners are the oldest of gravekeepers. This implies that the oldest burial rites revolve around water. These water burials, involving sending coffin ships down a river to a place where they can pool into renewed spiritual life. Spirits are eternal, as the surging frenzied flame item description tells us. Roderica echoes this when she tells us that immortal essence exists as spirit. This key truth makes it possible to summon spirits from their ashen remains, because a part of the individual is immortal. Because spirits are eternal, if one wants to control the processes of life, death, and rebirth, they must assume control of the flow of the spiritual energy cycle. The game conceptualizes death as slumber and rebirth as sleep. The spirit, though immortal, does go through a period of night during which it sleeps, dreams, and is not conscious. We already know that Rauh was well versed in working with spiritual energy, and we know they were experts in manipulating the flow of water. Putting these two concepts together, I reason that Rauh could have been one of the first to conceptualize the spiritual energy cycle as being akin to the flow of water, and they sought to control it like they sought to control the flow of water in the lands between. This includes controlling how spiritual life is renewed in death and reborn into new life. The journey of the spirit through night. I think the linchpin tying Rauh to night and these water burial practices is in the dew gems item description. Quote, succulent plant that is supped on night-tinged dew, glows at night and blossoms mainly at the water side, said to have been used in the practice of sprite medicine long ago. Besides Belurat, the Rauh ruins are where we find the most dew gems in the game. Which makes sense. Rauh is the civilization that originated working with sprites. Perhaps this practice was known as sprite medicine back then. I believe that the night-tinged dew that the dew gem sups on comes from the essence of the slumbering spirits absorbed into the water during water burials. I think the dew gem directly connects Rauh, sprite medicine, and the concept of night. I also want to point out a few subtle hints that the game gives us to help connect Rauh to night. Their ruins are made of black stone, and many of these places have dark underground sections. Rauh's descendants, the Astrologers, studied the night sky. Within Rauh, there is an altar where we can convert the stone-sheathed sword to either the Sword of Light or the Sword of Darkness. I will also say that there are bats at nearly every set of Rauh ruins. Limgrave, Ruin-Strewn Precipice, High Road Cave, Caelid, Snow Valley. Bats, bats, bats. I think the reason these nocturnal creatures are here is to help us make the connection to darkness and night. After our journey through night together in this video, I'm left with a thought. Perhaps it makes sense that Rauh's people sought power in the form of golems, which led them to their alliance with the Fire Giants. Perhaps they sought legacy, to build huge ruins to inspire wonder and awe in those who gaze upon them, long after their name has faded from memory. Or perhaps the denizens of Rauh were like Jolan and Anna. Perhaps they were raised in darkness, deprived of light, taught to worship the night. Yet, like Jolan and Anna, perhaps their role as stewards of the spiritual night left them burdened, longing for light and warmth. Thus did they search out those who could provide such things. Why they illuminated their halls with fire and built a fiery altar in their temple. Perhaps night and flame have always been drawn to one another, and always will be. There is so much more to be said about Rauh. We didn't talk about Rauh's connections to Rot and the Crucible, and why Devonia is searching for the Crucible's origins here, of all places. We didn't talk about Rauh's goddess, who she may be and what she represents. I also brought up a discussion of water and night and didn't talk about the Nox. This is because the story of the Nox is one entwined with Leyndell, and we'll need a whole discussion about that before we can connect the Nox back to Rauh. We'll discuss these topics in future videos. If you enjoyed this video and feel that it contributes positively to the Elden Ring community, please leave a like to help boost its visibility within YouTube's algorithm. Tarnished Warrior, thank you so very much for watching. See you in the next video.